right on time tonight. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining for the last event of the Chabad Resiliency Series for this year. And I'm really excited to have this event and really grateful to the parents that are joining. Some of the students asked me to share a thought on resiliency in Judaism, and I found something really nice that I wanted to share with you. In 1981, 9-year-old Jimmy Beveridge and his 3 brothers went hiking in some of the mountains of California, while their parents stayed back at the camping site to prepare lunch. Jimmy separated from his brothers and he got lost. A couple hundred searchers joined to search for Jimmy, and he was found after 4 days. Unfortunately, the ending was not a happy one. He had died from hypothermia. In his memory, some members of the search team developed an educational program designed to teach children to stay safe in the wilderness. They publicized a simple life-saving principle. If you're lost, stay put and hug a tree until help arrives. There's something very grounding about trees. They're solid, they're stationary, and they're very easy to hug. And with roots knotted firmly in the ground, a dense nest of branches that hang over it, and the fruit that it bears, a tree can really help anchor a lost and disoriented person in a very special way. And so from a Jewish perspective, the Torah tells us that there's a verse in Deuteronomy that says that man is the tree of the field, ki ha'adam etz hasadeh. And why is the Torah calling man a tree? It's as if to tell us that if you want to know something about yourself, look at a tree. We share an identity of sorts. In fact, according to Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, a tree is like a mirror that reflects our better selves. There are lots of thought-provoking insights about the lessons learned from a tree. For one, a tree needs to be attached to its life source, to soil, in order to survive, in order to thrive. Unlike, an animal is dependent on the soil on the ground, but it doesn't need to be firmly attached in order to survive, in order to grow. And the tree is stationary. It's always constantly soaking up the earth's, the water and the vital nutrients that it gets from it. And in the human tree, as us as people, our roots represent our faith. The trunk and the branches, the leaves, the fruit, those symbolize our intellectual, our emotional faculties. And the fruit is really our ability to create new life and to affect others. And we're here about resilience. One of the most admirable traits of a tree is really its resilience. Like all perennial plants, they thrive throughout the 4 seasons, depending, what it's about. And many trees can withstand windstorms of gusts of winds of, up to 60 miles an hour or more. And trees can live for over 2,000 years. Resiliency is a nice trait, and it's one that I constantly struggle to hone. But there are many ups and downs in life. And in my life of serenity, it sometimes seems like my boat is just always being rocked. There are several things that I'm worried about at any given point in time. I mean, I am a Jewish mother. So, so for myself, my new mantra, my affirmation that I say for myself always is, be resilient, be like a tree. And the key to the tree's strength is the roots, the strong roots that it has. And as a Jewish person, the root of my soul, of my strength, is really my faith in God, my faith in Hashem. It's really interesting. The Hebrew word for faith is emunah, Aleph, Mem, Vav, Nun, and Hey. And it shares the same etymology as another Hebrew word, which is omen. And omen is a skilled worker. Faith, like any good skill, it needs practice. It needs to be cultivated. And when a psyche is saturated with faith, then it can continually grow and be strong and rooted in what it needs to be doing. And it's resilient, it's durable, and it can withstand the winds of life with a lot of grace. So when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking that maybe there's another dimension to the hug a tree principle. It's easy to get lost and distracted in the dense life, in the forest that we have, of all the different stuff that are going on, the winds that blow. And if we think about the lessons that we can learn from a tree, it's really the ability to stay grounded and to stay centered. and to really be aware, at least for myself, that at the end of the day, it's Hashem, it's God that runs the world, and ultimately God loves us. And, you know, with that, no matter how the boat rocks, we will always be okay. And we're incredibly privileged today to have with us 3 trees who have strong, grounded roots, and even more privileged to have their fruit, their children here together with them. It's a little cliche, but it works. Who will, we're honored to have them and have them introduce their parents. So with that, I'm going to pin Lauren and her dad. Let me just find him 1 second, right here. And there we go.
All right, can everyone hear me? Okay, hi everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lori Dori, and I'm a junior here at Union College. My dad, Dr. Ezra Dori, is one of the speakers for this parent panel focused on resiliency. My dad is a practicing OBGYN whose practice is based in Brooklyn, New York, working in some of the hardest hit communities during the pandemic, including Borough Park, Williamsburg, and Crown Heights. My dad really had to adjust to a new way of life while continuing to provide the highest quality of care to his patients. And for any of you who know my dad, you know he always puts his patients first. Given that I was home from school for a few months as we were all adjusting to this new way of life, I was really able to witness firsthand the perseverance and commitment that my dad showed, not only as a physician taking care of patients, but as a husband and a father caring for me, my mom, my brother Mark, and of course, our dog Jack. I'm currently studying to become a physician myself, and when I start to think about the traits that I want to embody when I take care of my patients, I think about the resiliency my dad displayed during these trying times. Even with the pandemic, he didn't miss a beat, answering patients' calls at all hours of the night, even when he should have been spending time with me, and driving back and forth from the hospital 24/7. I really hope that this panel allows us all to reflect on the fact that although we all face times of uncertainty at some point in our lives, even outside of COVID, anyone is capable of being resilient as long as they're dedicated and passionate about what they do. Thank you.
Thank you so
That
much
was
for the introduction.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we're going to pin Leslie and Emma right there. And let me just find Emma. There we go.
Okay, so in the fall, I was named Mentor of the Week, and during my discussion with Lakey, I couldn't help but talk about my mom, which led her to being here today. My mom is my role model and has taught me everything I know. She has shown me what hard work and resilience truly means. My mom ran her own per diem law firm for over 15 years in the Bronx, and when COVID hit, she reinvented herself after losing the job she loved so much. She was in the courthouse on March 13th and hasn't been back since, which she likes to remind us about because she wants to go back. Although it was difficult, my mom did what she had to and found a way to create a new practice. Incredibly, she did all of this while dealing with my sister and brother, fighting for her attention, and of course the 2 puppies, Prince and Carter. But she is my inspiration, and I'm so happy she's here with us today.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to replace the pin now with Lori, and let's find Allie. Oh, it might be under Raina. There we go.
Hi, I'm Lori Katzman. Raina's gonna do the introduction, but very proud of my mom for being here. We love you.
Okay, yes. Hi, I'm Raina, Hallie's sister, and we're super excited to introduce our mom, Dr. Lori Katzman. So our mom is a great example of someone who is a positive light during a dark time. She is known by her friends and of course us as a wise woman who is full of amazing advice. So when the pandemic began, of course, our mom had to try to figure out how to continue her career as a clinical psychologist at a long-term care community. And of course, she could not go into work being that her patients are all of the geriatric population. But as a psychologist, she knew how important her work was and continued to be, especially during this time. So since we were home from college at this point, we got the opportunity to witness our mom work extremely hard, especially at an attempt to move her patients over to teletherapy or platforms like FaceTime or Zoom. So this task was made harder by her patients being really older and a little bit technologically challenged, but our mom did an amazing job at transferring her work to go virtual. And we would witness her almost lose her voice from shouting on the phone during the day, closed up in her room upstairs all day, so her hard of hearing patients could still hear her over the phone. She's a role model to both of us in many aspects of our life, but her resiliency, especially during COVID, was extremely impressive. So, Mom, we love you. That's your little intro.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to add now all the panelists. Give us 1 second. And you can change to speaker view if you want to just see the panelists, but you know, either way. And let's just pin ourselves. Okay, so we prepared a series of questions and we'll sort of lead up and follow up, give everyone some context about everything, and then we'll be able to hear from everyone their thoughts and perspectives. We're really excited about this. You see, obviously, that we have a really nice diversity of professions, perspective, insights, experiences, and so together that would make for a really nice, well-rounded discussion. Shmuley is here to help me with the moderating. He's great at building off of a conversation. So, you know, going on a thought, leading it, following up with another question, then also keeping track of time, because once I start talking. Okay, so we're going to start with the first question. It was for everyone, how were your personal or professional lives affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? I think you all got a lot of insight into that with the children introducing their parents, the students introducing their parents. And the question is what did you do to adapt at a time of such uncertainty, you know, personally, professionally, in any way? So let's start with Lori. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm on. So I think, Raina, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this evening following the last 2 weeks. Those are, I think Leslie said, big shoes to step into. I fully agree. It was a transition for all of us, and Hallie and Raina highlighted that I'm a psychologist. I work in a long-term care community, and I work with the most vulnerable population, as we know, that were impacted by COVID. And I'm an independent practitioner, so I work at the community and wasn't allowed to come in for months. They only had certain staff members who were permitted to come in. And so I needed and wanted to be able to be there for the community, particularly the patients that I worked with, as well as the larger community. I felt an obligation to be there for everybody, even if they were not my particular patient, because it was such a trying time and they were on lockdown like many of us were. So I transitioned to teletherapy and went everything from the regular phone to Zoom to Facebook Messenger with somebody to FaceTime, which in typical times, none of that is really permissible with the profession of psychology. But the rules were changed and it was approved that mental health services could be provided under really any circumstances, any way you could connect with the people there. Since that time, I've transferred over to other HIPAA approved platforms, but anything went at that time. And so like the girls said, we were all home. My husband was home working, the girls were doing their classes. And I have to say, initially, I thought y'all would be back at school in a few weeks. I thought, let's hunker down as a country and get this thing together. And I thought if anybody could get back to school, it would be Union, because you go to June. And I thought you'd get back there. As time went on, that clearly didn't happen. And I think the mindset shifted. And you know, as a family, we did puzzles. We binged some Netflix shows together. We had dinner together every night. Not breakfast because they probably slept in later, but lunch. A lot of together time and walking. So personally, you know, love my family. Nothing more important than me to spend time with my family and my kids. So while on one hand, happy to be with them, on the other hand, not so happy to be with them under these circumstances. That is not how I wanted us to be together, why we were together. So that was really difficult. And I found all of us going through, and please stop me if I'm going too long, Lakey, but this whole grief and mourning, everybody lost something. And we had to process that and sort of pick ourselves up and figure out how to move forward. But in terms of adapting professionally, at some point I did go back in a little bit, and part of me helping my patients was also helping myself. I was anxious. I was nervous to go back in. And how did that look? What did that feel like? And it was well before I was vaccinated. So it was different. It was nerve-wracking, but I had to be resilient and interpret the situation differently and know that I was doing what I could do and what was in my control to take care of. So masked up, shielded up, gowned up. And in terms of the hard of hearing is a real issue. People have a hard time hearing me with a couple of masks on. So I have done some evals, literally bringing in a Sharpie and, you know, a big notebook, writing down my questions so I could let them answer me. So that was my way of adapting, because they couldn't always hear me when we're sitting so far apart and I'm all covered up. So those were the first 3 evals I did in June. I went back. There were 3 people that really needed to be seen in person. Teletherapy wasn't going to work. And we went into a corner area, one at a time. And that's how I conducted those 3 sessions, was writing everything down. And they talked, and my questions followed, you know, their answers. It's getting better now. I took off the shield, wearing 2 masks only, and everybody's vaccinated for the most part. I have one patient for medical reasons is not, but it's been a long year for everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Answer?
Yeah, thank you. So you really had to do a lot of adapting, and really just out of a sense of needing to help your clients. And that's incredible, you know, because of the great risk. I know from Leslie, you had a different kind of adapting to do.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's interesting to listen to somebody have to adapt their career. For me, as Emma said, I went to work on March 13th. We all knew the pandemic was there. We didn't know what it was about. And for the week or 2 weeks before in court, we talked about it, what was going to be. We hoarded masks. We ordered them on Amazon weeks before. We got gloves and we got hand sanitizer, but we didn't really have any idea of what the future was going to bring. And I think still to this day, that for me is the hardest part, is the uncertainty. And I think it's really hard to be resilient when you're uncertain. And that counter emotion really hit hard. So we went to work on March 13th, and we get an email at the end of the day that the courts are going to be suspended, with no time frame, with no information. And just so you understand what I do, I was hired by other lawyers to go to court in the Bronx. The Bronx is a big venue with lots of court appearances, and small law firms can't send their lawyers there. So I'm like a pinch hitter or a substitute teacher, but I had been there for 15 years. I had built my career. I love being in court. It's always what I wanted to do. I had relationships with judges, court officers, other attorneys. It was like my second home. And I felt really valuable there. And I felt like the connections I had made really gave me my identity. I mean, I'm a mother first, but being a courtroom lawyer was really what I enjoyed. And I loved it. And I had built this practice from nothing. I started with a partner when Emma and Bailey started kindergarten. And I really was proud of myself. And I think that everybody knew how I felt about my job. It wasn't always rainbows and sunshine. I had a 2-hour commute and it was tough, but I loved it. And I never thought that I would go to work one day and then never return. I still haven't been back. The courts still haven't opened. So not only was it part of my identity, it was part of my family's economic well-being. I kind of think if you think about how Broadway is doing, that's how the courthouses are doing. You want to go see a Broadway show? You can't. You want to walk into a courtroom? You can't. So it was, my identity was taken away on March 13th. And I still can weep about it. I still wake up some mornings and think to myself, I'm going to get to go back to work tomorrow. And I'm not, because during the past 15 months that this has been going on, the courts redid everything. And now everything is virtual, just like we're doing this here tonight. There's no reason for me to go back to court because people can spend 5 minutes away from doing what they're doing to pick up and do it online. So when the realization hit, because we didn't know how long we were going to be out of court. So this was in March. We said by the end of the summer, we'll be back. So I didn't know, but I felt very uncertain about it. There was never a guarantee that we were going to be back. And people would speak and the writing was on the wall. It didn't look like we were getting back, but there was always a glimmer of hope. But that glimmer kept going and going and going. So what I found to pull myself up was to be with my family, just like Lori said. It was a gift to lose my career, but have Emma, Bailey, Ethan, my husband home all the time. And like Lori, we cooked, we baked, we played games, we celebrated, we did everything we could to avoid the sadness of the uncertainty. That was really the part that was so hard, it was so sad. And I remember, as much as Emma looks at me as a role model and as a source of inspiration, I found my family a source of inspiration because they were in college and were supposed to be having the time of their life and their rug was pulled out also. So to me, the whole situation just was uncertain. And again, it's hard to be resilient in an uncertain time. I don't know how we go about doing that. And I know we're going to get to a lot of these topics after, so I don't want to go off topic, but I really think that the adversity is what makes us a strong people. That's what we find something within ourselves to be strong. And for me, it was my family. And I remember walking with the kids because like Lori, we must have walked, 100 miles a week we were on the road. And I remember saying to Emma, I think I'm getting early onset Alzheimer's. I can't remember anything. And I'm known for my memory. I would feel very strong and secure in the things that I remembered. But I felt like I was losing all of those things. So Emma's like, Mom, you don't get Alzheimer's in one day. You're fine. Just, you have to figure this out. So to circle back, I have a friend who came to me about a new career idea, and we met together in June, and by July 15th, we had started a new business. And it gave me that hope that I can do something, that I was able to start, learn something that I had never, ever imagined that I would understand and be able to do. And it was inspiring to me to be able to learn and to share and to experience this at my age, at this stage in my career, to start something brand new. And I have to say that now, almost a year, we're developing a really great business. And it'll never be what I had, but I was able to find the strength to start something new. And I'm again proud of myself, proud of what I was able to do, and hope to take this to the same level that I was able to take my first career to.
That's incredible. I mean, to start a new career in the middle of a global pandemic is just beyond brave and resilient. Yeah.
Well, it's no Matt Tyson, but I'll take a little bit of resiliency on that. We all have him to be inspired by. I think what we do are small steps, and you have whatever is handed to you. You have to really make the best of, and that's the life lesson. Is not to be knocked down, but to find the strength to do something else.
Yeah. And then we have Dr. Dori, and Dr. Dori, I mean, you're an OBGYN, you couldn't stop. You had to keep going into the office, going into the hospital. So share your perspective.
So first of all, again, thank you so much for having us tonight. I think these sessions are very beneficial. It's kind of nice to hear other people's experiences because you almost feel like we were all living in our own world with our own set of unknowns and how we were dealing with them. And listening to other people share their experiences is really inspirational. I had been through, other situations. 9/11 when it hit, my office was a few blocks away from where the towers came down, and I remember what the world was like then. I remember being in my office in Borough Park on that day, and I'm taking you back to that for a second because that was just some disaster that happened that captured the world's attention. It changed everybody's life, and I always felt, how could anything be the same? How can anything be better than it was? And in fact, it was. Things after time, 9/11, passed, and we became a different society. We've done different things in terms of security and things like that. But we moved on, life moved on, and New York City regained its power. But then COVID came, and this pandemic, obviously unprecedented, was quite interesting for people in the healthcare field, particularly because we can't stop. We can't work virtually, most of us. We signed up to be doctors. We signed up to be doctors in the best of times and the worst of times. So we can't really say, I just don't want to come in to work today. And I remember going away on a trip right before. I never really traveled the end of February, but this time I did. And I remember hearing about this virus, and I'm thinking, okay, SARS, COVID. I remember SARS at one point, there was a different version of SARS in China a few years before, and it was concerning, and people were wearing masks. And I said, okay. And Ebola, we went through that kind of situation here. Even on Long Island, they were concerned that the Ebola was going to be an outbreak, and the hospitals were preparing for it. It kind of faded away. But when I came back, and I remember landing at JFK, now this was around March, I think 5th or 6th. So you can imagine, I'm already listening to the news overseas about what's going on. Every day, it seems like the news is getting a little bit worse. I said to myself, okay, this doesn't look like it's going away so fast, and I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. So, as Lauren told you, I take care of patients mainly in the Hasidic Jewish neighborhoods of Crown Heights, Williamsburg, Borough Park. And I remember going to the office, and it was right before Purim. And as everybody may know, Purim is a very widely celebrated holiday with family gatherings, people getting together. It's a very happy time. So I'm coming back from work, and I remember that Monday, I see patients in the office. New York City's starting to get quiet. I don't know why. I just got back from vacation. My office was quiet because, the husbands were preparing at home, for the big parties out that night, and the wives are going to run home and join and things like that. Tuesday, Purim hits, no problem. The holiday starts. Starting Wednesday, Thursday, that's right after Purim. So we believe that there were so many people getting together, and there was so much misinformation about, we weren't protecting anybody because nobody was telling anybody, this is what we need to do when we have this kind of a situation going on. We don't know much about, but we know it's contagious. So I don't think gatherings are really appropriate during a contagious event. So nonetheless, from that moment on, people were just getting sick. You can hear the Hatzalah ambulances, which is the private ambulance service, which is the ambulance service a lot of my patients use, just sirens back and forth and back and forth. And the hospitals reaching capacity and then surpassing capacity, working on call at the hospital. I still remember I had something unusual happen. One of my patients, just as an aside thing, in labor, had a bit of an anxiety attack. The nurse got nervous. She called something called a rapid response. It calls in a team of people from the ICU. So again, I'm hearing about COVID. I'm hearing people are getting sick, but it's still not really hitting me that hard. So I said, let me ask these real frontline people. They're working in the ICUs. What is really going on over there? What's going on the floor right above us? They go, you don't even want to know. It's insane. We are jam-packed. We've had to move patients that were already in the ICU. The ICU on a good day is usually busy, to other parts of the hospital. We have a psychiatric hospital right not far from our hospital. They actually basically took a whole ward there and just started moving patients there. And remember, these are all critical patients. These are not just patients that are coming in, who are just being in the hospital for a day or two after hip surgery. These are people that are really critically ill. And I just remember hearing what was going on, and now it became real. And then what actually scared me probably the most, this is, for a doctor especially, is one of my colleagues was actually intubated, got sick, got intubated, and we weren't sure he was even going to make it. So this is somebody who works in my department, in my field, I know him very well, and who was otherwise as healthy as can be that I know. So this was real. We knew this was real. And what I had to do was to be resilient is you have to think, what can I do? So one of the things we did in my practice, we tried a lot of education. So first of all, we limited the number of people already before they actually said you can only have one person, the patient come to the office. We already did that. We already said, listen, we're just going to social distance. We're going to limit the number of patients in the office because we knew that has to be one of the first steps we had to take. And then it was a lot of education, and word gets around in that community because social media is not a big. Nobody uses social media there. Very few. Certain parts, certain communities do, but for the vast majority of people, it's word of mouth. It's when a rabbi may say something and it gets out to the community. But that's really where we had to get the message across, because people were dying, parents were dying, grandparents were dying, young people were dying. That was the scary part, that this disease saw no age, didn't really matter whether you were healthy before or not. Yes, if you were ill before, if you were elderly, for sure, you took a bigger hit. But this disease was really just robbing 20-year-olds of their life. And if not, at least certainly keeping them in the hospital for a very long time and intubated, which is already quite incredible. Nonetheless, we wear masks a lot in general. We do deliveries, we do surgery, so we were used to that. But now we're wearing an N95 mask. Now imagine a patient in labor having to wear a mask. You're wearing an N95 mask in a small room and gowned up like you're walking into a nuclear reactor. And and now you got to deliver a baby and still communicate with the patient. And we had a point where we weren't even allowing the husbands of the patient to come to the delivery. So imagine having a baby during a pandemic, people getting sick left and right. And now you're coming into labor, you're on the labor floor, and I'm coming here to deliver your baby, and your husband's not with you, especially if it's your first baby. You're scared. You don't know what's next, what's happening. So it was, certainly trying times. But like anything, we learn from experience, and we learn how to make the best of it. Eventually, using telemedicine helped us a little bit for all our consults. Educating the community really helped because people, they would come in and they wouldn't know what was going on in the outside world until you told them, hey, this is real. Washing hands, wearing masks. We have people just wanted to get their kids. It's one thing when you have one or two children. Again, I also loved having my children home during the pandemic. When you imagine you live in Brooklyn, family of 10, okay? One of the greatest things for mom is the kids are in school, they're getting an education, she can run around and do her errands, dad's learning in yeshiva. Now, 10 kids are now stuck at home. There is no yeshiva, there is no school, there is nothing. So first of all, that's not even helping the situation in terms of decreasing the spread of the disease, but also making people go a little bonkers. So, we were dealing with a lot of emotional issues with this. So COVID really hit the world very hard, hit some communities extremely hard. And it's particularly disturbing when it's a community where, getting information out was not really an exact science. So, but nonetheless, a year later, I can say that, things are definitely looking up. I mean, the hospitals are definitely opening their doors. We're doing elective surgeries for a couple of months now already. Those were all canceled. We're, allowing family members to come to the hospital, labor coaches, and it's a year has made a humongous difference. I would say since the vaccine came out, it's remarkable. And I do see an upward trend into us going back to some sort of normalcy. I do think we're all going to experience a new normal in medicine and non in medicine, but I think, this whole concept of having meetings on Teams and Zoom, and for someone like me, I never had those meetings. It was always like, oh gosh, I got to make this meeting at the hospital today at 8 or tomorrow at 10. I never thought of Teams and Zoom. And now it's, if we're having an in-person meeting, I'm shocked, so that's, I guess, the good thing maybe that came out of it. You can't ever have an excuse, although maybe not such a good thing. You can't ever have an excuse for not attending a meeting, but really so lots of things have happened in a year, but I definitely think we became stronger as a society. I think we've all learned a lot, and yeah, that's my spiel.
Thank you. Thank you. And full disclosure, before Shmuley and I moved to Schenectady, we lived in Brooklyn for a few years and in Crown Heights, which is kind of where the center of the Chabad community is. And Dr. Dori was my doctor, and he cared for me when I was pregnant with our first two. Yeah, really good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, we have a personal relationship as well. You know, it's really nice come for circle. So now we try to care for Lauren. We do our best. So so actually, I think I'm just going to continue straight with you. And you know, you're talking about, you know, all the uncertainty and the changes. And one of the things that I find for myself is that when you have things that we just do every day, we keep, you know, routine, schedule, rituals, that really helps to ground us despite, you know, everything that's going on around us. And obviously, you know, as Chabad and, you know, as a Jewish organization on campus, and, you know, having 3 Jewish parents here, the question is, you know, if you have any Jewish values or rituals that have helped you to navigate through the unpredictability, the uncertainty of this pandemic, and really of, you know, life is always, there's so much that is uncertain and unpredictable. So if you want to share some of that with us.
So I actually like to fill in every day, you know, so I stick to some of my customs that I'm comfortable with. I never really grew up in a fully Orthodox home, you know, a lot of my family members are, and I connect a lot with my communities, patients that I serve, and it really has helped spiritually just to know that we, you know, pray to Hashem that things should go well. Obviously, we have to believe in science too, but you have to believe in some sort of a power that has to be in control. So I like to tell my patients a lot of times, you know, a lot of times they get very nervous and you know, and they don't know, you know, how their pregnancy is going to go, or certainly if there's an issue. And at some point, I tell patients, you know, you got to let go a little bit. You got to let us take care of it. You got to let science kind of handle the situation, almost like when you're on an airplane and you got to let the pilot fly the plane. You just have to sit back, fasten your seatbelt, relax, enjoy the flight of life. You know, it's sometimes very hard to understand that, but it's true. At some point, you have to just believe in, yes, science, of course, because that's what's guiding us, but a power that's looking after us. So what is my job? My job is to do good deeds, take care of my patients, and just be a good person. I feel like that will be rewarded with, God willing, health and prosperity that we all seek. So that's how, for me, that's how I can answer that question.
That's beautiful. And that takes work, and really being conscious of that, because that takes work and practice. Lori, I know that you have some rituals that you do in terms of Jewish. Do you want to share?
Are you talking about baking challah?
Yeah.
we do that. Love doing that. I look forward to it every week. And I find that when I make some extra, I can freeze it when I can't make it fresh, because Fridays sometimes I actually do have to work. But there is something very grounding and comfortable in routine and traditions. And I think what was most unsettling about transitioning to COVID life was that many of our routines were taken from us. And when you don't have that typical structure, what do you have? And I think when people are left without their day-to-day typical activities and left to their own devices, not everybody has that skill to sort of self-initiate and create a new routine. So Ezra said about a new normal. What has gotten me through this whole time kept saying is that the only, and I always mess up my phrases, so bear with me, but the only thing that is constant is that things change. So I found that once I got into a new routine, the guidelines shifted, everything shifted. What I did at work shifted, the rules shifted, so you needed to evolve and adapt, and that was constant. But in terms of traditions and Jewish values, I found that exactly what we needed to do to safeguard lives was to isolate very much initially, right? That was the only way we knew how to keep ourselves safe. So you're safeguarding lives, which inadvertently creates loneliness, social isolation, which as a psychologist, those are, triggers to depression, particularly with the geriatric population, let alone other people. So you're safeguarding lives on the one hand by keeping yourself alone, but then you're cutting yourself off in a way from community, which is another Jewish value of having to build and be part of community. So those were in conflict with one another. What I found remarkable was how quickly all facets of our society shifted to staying connected somehow, some way. I mean, our shul, started having services through Zoom. I found I went more than typically going actually to the synagogue. It was, frankly, it's easier. And, meetings, I met with a bunch of my colleagues that we'd never had a group meeting, a bunch of psychologists and social workers. We would meet religiously every Wednesday morning to just touch base with one another. So in some ways we connected more. Then I was feeling the guilt of not being face-to-face and part of the community. And I didn't say in my opening was that, just to give you a sense, it's a long-term care community that I work at. It's roughly 400 residents comprised of independent living, assisted living, skilled nursing, and subacute. So there's all ranges of needs, cognitive ability, levels of independence. And I'm the psychologist for different people within those different communities, but I am the psychologist for the whole community. And there's a monthly newsletter that goes out there. I don't ordinarily write in that, but I felt to build community and to prevent some isolation that they invariably were feeling for the first at least 3 months, I would write a newsletter and giving very concrete strategies as to how to cope, how to interpret, what to do with your time, literally what to say when you call somebody on the phone. What questions might you ask? These are people who their social construct was breakfast or lunch and dinner, going to the main bistro. That's where you socialized and see people. They were absent of any of that connection. So they were only left to communicating by phone. That wasn't a really practiced skill for them. So I tried to go back to the basics. But again, I thought the comparison of we need you to stay alone to stay alive, but to what expense, right? We all heard that everybody's emotional health was really affected over this past year. So people did question, well, was it worth it to a degree? Their mental well-being at the expense of staying alive. So how do you still stay connected and have community and do Zooms like this? But my Jewish values, routine, baking, like you said, and then I think being part of larger community. It's hard to have a conversation about this year without talking about civil rights, right? And Black Lives Matters and the recent discrimination against Asians and just so many different community outreach, and how do you still participate by staying safe? And that was, I felt like the whole tikkun olam of how do we repair the world and be part of something bigger. So volunteering, the election, we wrote hundreds of postcards from home to get the word out for, not making this political, I'm sorry, but just in terms of being part of something bigger, but still staying at home in a way. So those were how I did it, and the kids did it while they were home, and my husband, in terms of staying connected to Judaism and our values, but volunteering is a big part of that, and being part of other communities and staying connected. I took umbrage, I think, in the very beginning with the term social distancing. Right away, I knew that was sending the wrong message because that was the last thing you wanted. I understand what was meant, but if you're literal, it's physical distancing. How can you stay connected socially, but keep yourself physically apart? And so that was in that first newsletter, to try to explain to people how to do it. And I have to say, our community was extremely conservative in their approach. They really locked down. We only had 8 deaths that I'm aware of over the year, which I think compared to other communities, I mean, 8 is too many anyway, but compared, over 100 staff members were positive, no deaths. So, you know, it worked to a degree, but was hard to manage throughout. But staying connected to community, I think, is the most important Jewish value, which was hard to do for everybody.
Yeah. And I know that, Leslie, when we spoke on the phone, you were telling about how, you know, a big part of the Jewish celebrations and stuff that you had at home with your family was together with other people, with, you know, friends and stuff. So how are you able to navigate that and have, you know, your values, your Jewish traditions, and anything that you did that you felt kept you grounded? And
right. I definitely think that we found comfort in being in our family. And since the pandemic was in March, there was a lot of things that we were looking forward to. So we had my husband's birthday, we had Passover, we had M.M. Bailey's birthday, it was Mother's Day. So we made a big deal about each one of those events. And I mean, a really big deal. We decorated the house, we had drinking games, we had party games, we were outside. We really tried to make the best of every single event. We planned menus. We Emma baked with her brother and sister for every event. We made cakes. And part of the reason I think our family was very anxious about COVID, as every family was, is that my husband's mother, who's 85 years old, lives with us. She's lived with us for the past 12 years. And I mean, we know my kids, and they're all, you know, this age. They're Emma and Billy are 20. My son had just graduated from college. That was another big celebration. We were all afraid to leave the house because we were afraid that we would bring something home and that would affect my mother-in-law. It was a very scary time for all of us. So what we did, we just stayed together and made the best of every situation that we could. We felt that that was what kept us together. And I think that, you know, even in the most troubling and trying times, the Jewish people do that. You know, they look for the time to celebrate. Max Eisen even talked about, you know, Passover in the camps, that those were important times for Jewish people. And I also think that just historically, when there's adversity, the Jewish people join together and find a way to be with the community. And I think Lori said that. So many people, and, you know, we're not alone in this. This was like, you know, a universal problem. And it gave you a time to find people that you hadn't spoken to in so many years, because you didn't all have to be at the same place at the same time. You were home. So you reconnected. I had Zooms with my college roommates. I had gone on actually a trip to Israel many years ago, and we all reconnected and had a big Zoom call. So just that connection with people was what kept us all together. And I think that that's a universal appeal. It's not necessarily just a Jewish appeal. And people found comfort in conversation, and it made you feel better, and it gave you more to talk about, because what were you talking about other than COVID and Netflix? So you can catch up with people that you haven't spoken to in years and find out about their kids and their family and what they've done. And you got off the phone and you had a moment of normalcy, or you got off the Zoom and laughed about how old someone looked, or how, you know, how we all are so different than we were 15 years ago. It was nice to have those moments of connection. And I think that they were bright spots during, you know, a dark time.
yeah, I can definitely agree with that and relate to that so much. I know, you know, just in terms of family celebrations, just having, you know, what would take so much to put together a family reunion and having everyone just hop on a Zoom together. And that was, you know, that was like the silver lining almost of COVID-19. So we are running short on time. So I'm going to go to the last question that we that we put out. It's a little bit of a heavy question. I'm going to give some context to everyone. So there's something called an ethical will. It's something that the Jewish people, and everyone kept saying that the Jewish people, we're a resilient people. We have been through more than 3,000 years of history, Jewish history, and a lot of that have been of Jewish people being persecuted throughout the ages, different countries, and so much. And there's always been this, in terms of resilience, this focus on the future, not just to survive, but to thrive, to be contributing members to society, to the world, to our, the micro ultimately affecting the macro in a good way. And so that the ethical will is about before a person passes on, but really to think about that anytime is really about communicating, our values, our experiences, and our life lessons to our family. And this is something that, we pass on for generations to come. We know of people who have done as many generations before, that their family are still following those values till today, because this is something that, our family does. It's incredible. And so I think that with COVID, I remember at the beginning, there was so much unknown and it was so scary. And, I remember thinking, what if, God forbid, the worst happens? We really didn't know. And when there's that fear of the unknown there, it's so scary, just, going through the news and social media, which was probably a big mistake, was a big mistake. There's that fear, well, what, just personally for myself and Shmuley, what if, God forbid, something happens to myself, something happens to Shmuley, what will be of our kids, our family, everything that we built together. And so it really makes you stop from it and think, what do I want to leave for my children? And not just materially, but, spiritually, and, what do I want them to remember of me? And what do I want them to, to know, and what was important to me? So, and I'm sure that everybody faced this kind of like moment of reckoning, and then you have to think about that. So we asked the panelists to think of, what would they want to, having gone through God, thank God we're almost at, the lights at the end of the tunnel, we're making our way, to the end of this. What would you, having gone through COVID, what would you put in your ethical will, thinking of the future? Actually let's start with Leslie.
Okay, it is a heavy question, and it's a lot to think about. And I almost thought of it as like my moral legacy. Like, what is it that I want my children to think about when they think about me? Makes me sad, because my mother's gone, and I think of her every day, and her legacy is so embedded in me. And the most important thing that her legacy left me was, and I go back to it every time, is family, is the connection that I have with my family, that the times that we spend together are so important. And the quality time comes, and this was definitely something through COVID, is that the quality time comes from the quantity time. You were together so much that there were moments of such beautiful quality that we just would be together, and we would laugh, and we would share our like deepest thoughts and have such great conversations. I think that the fact that my siblings, that my children, that as siblings, that they have a bond that keeps them together for their entire life. That I think that is something that as a parent makes me proud and makes me hopeful that that's something that they will share for their entire life. That message of spending time together as a family in good times and in bad is so important, to lean on each other. I also think that part of the legacy I would like to leave is that it's okay not to be perfect. That as long as you try at things, that's really what is significant. And everyone knows that expression that, you learn more from your failures than you do your successes. And if you don't try things, your life will be empty. You need to go out there and you need to try. You don't always have to do it right, but if you don't do it at all, then you have nothing. And that goes with so many things. These questions you pose to us, really, you can't help but think about them once you get the question and continue to think about them after the fact. I thought even about like charity with this kind of thing, like during COVID and, having some life-changing circumstances, you want to give, but then you think to yourself, I can't give everything because then I don't have anything. But then you give a little bit like that, and it doesn't go just for charity, but for everything. You don't have to give it all, but you have to give something. And I feel like that was important during COVID also. Like, you know, you wanted to keep everything, but you have to share what you can give with other people, whether it's your time, your money. It's important to share your values with other people also. I think that the legacy is something that's ever changing also. Like as you develop different relationships and as time goes on, those values will change and they should be discussed all the time. You know, little kids, little problems. As your kids get older, you want to have these conversations. My son is struggling looking for a job, and our conversations are always changing about who you want to be and what you want to put out there. So you can have the conversations now about your ethical will, but it should be something that you continue to have in the future.
Absolutely, and that's beautiful. And I love what you said about giving and sharing. Everything that you said is important, and this is something that we always emphasize, you know, for ourselves and the students, that really Judaism is the ultimate thing, because it's about selflessness. You know, what we have, what we were gifted with, you know, all the resources, the talents, the abilities that we have. It's really so that we can share it with others, you know, to use what we have. And like it says that, like, if you know Aleph, you share Aleph, you know, Aleph and Bet, then you share the Aleph and the Bet, you know, whatever we have, you know, it's not just for ourselves, but we were gifted with all of this to be able to share with others, because ultimately that will improve the world. And we always want to leave it better for the next, you know, generations to come. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Dori.
So, you know, having seen, you know, natural and unnatural kind of disasters, as I spoke about earlier, you know, 9/11 and COVID. And, you know, I feel like life is all about making the right choices. And we have to think of it as we can either stop what we're doing, break down and not progress, or we can learn from something and just become better. There has to be a reason why COVID came. I think the world, if we look at the world before COVID, the travel industry was overwhelmed. I love to travel, but the travel industry was overwhelmed. There were actually countries that were complaining of too many people visit. There was just so much going on. And I think COVID stopped us in our tracks, basically put many things to a halt, and kind of reminded us what's really also important: a sense of family, a sense of being together, a sense of learning from each other, and yet still being able to be connected through Zoom. So in other words, you know, the connection was not really ever lost. We just had to find another way of gaining that connection and stopping what we're doing on our everyday life. Because life is very different than when I was young. When I was young, there were no cell phones, there was no internet. You communicate just by speaking to somebody, or you pick up a phone, you know, connect to a wire and you speak to somebody. That was it. You know, we got to a point, I think, where, you know, with social media, most people, when you really observe them, what do you observe them? You observe them on their device. Really, everybody's kind of glued to that device. I mean, if you know, I remember when Lauren's phone one time broke. I forgot to screen. If I tell you that the panic that set in, and I was away, this is going back years ago. Sorry, Lauren, I have to say this. This is going back a couple years ago, and she was doing something in a summer program, and I'll never forget. My wife and I were on vacation, and all of a sudden the screen broke and the phone. And the panic and the absolute, like, now I don't know what I'm gonna do. I mean, I can't function right now. Or you go on a cruise and you lose that, you know, that sense of like, I can't communicate with the outside world. Like what's happening? I think COVID stopped us in our tracks and said, guys, enough. So what came out of it? You know, pollution in the world certainly has gotten, you know, has improved. I think we all have, you know, a different perspective on life and love of family and togetherness. There's so many things I can go into different categories, you know, of things. And, you know, unfortunately people lost jobs, but some of those people thrived in other jobs, as we heard earlier. You know, I mean, there are, you know, they found another direction. And I think that you have to pick up at some point during a disaster, say, it's almost like God is telling me I have to refocus. And now what should I do to become a successful person in this world? And that's really to me, what I think COVID did. I think it really just spending time with my children that were college age, having lunch or dinner with them, that was almost unheard of. I mean, that was never really happening unless we came up for visiting weekend or something. It's just, the kind of, my wife is also an OBGYN. I mean, we're kind of busy people that, we love our family. We love to spend time. We do a lot of vacations, but we never really sat for any prolonged period of time and discussed life in general. Without not just on the phone via text or what have you. So to me, I think a lot of things, I guess you have to look at the very positive things of every kind of badness. And, there were we have to focus on the good and how we can also in the future, how we can deal with such disasters. We see how this came and affected us in such a horrible way. It just came out, and this is the first disease that truly affected the world in most of our lifetime, and other than a world war, that really affect every nation, every people. It didn't see any boundary. I mean, aside from the one little island that somebody will mention has 100 people living on it that don't have COVID. Other than that, everybody was affected by COVID. So in some way, shape, or form, in a much more devastating way. And it also makes us appreciate what's going on. Look at India. What's going on in India right now is absolutely disastrous. And this is what we're just hearing. We're not in India. I mean, they don't have the resources that we have, so it's teaching us hopefully to be better people and how we can help people, teaching us some technology, how we can be better, as smart as we think we are in terms of coming out with so vaccines and medicines to cure all sorts of things, and surgeries that complicated robotic surgeries that can help, repair parts of the human body. We're learning now how to quickly identify a treatment for some absolutely disastrous bug. And so I definitely have to look at, what we've gained, what we've learned from this disease, and how we'll move forward. I definitely think it will make us stronger. As I said, after 9/11, I know it doesn't compare, but still it really kind of hit home for me. It affected the world in a different way. Definitely more, I would say, short-lived in a certain degree. It's not really so short-lived. It's a forever tragedy. But in terms of the actual impact was somewhat short-lived. But New York became, and the world became, stronger, smarter, better from it. So that's what I have to take from it.
Thank you. And it's not always easy to focus on the positive, especially when things are so hard. It definitely takes work. I mean, the result of it is very, it gives us resilience and strength. And so it's a legacy to pass on, to do that. And thank you. All right, Lori, you're up.
I know we're short on time, but I just, going off of what Ezra said about God, it's hard for me not to look at this year not through some of the eyes of the patients that I've worked with. I mean, they range in age from 67 to almost 102. So I think Professor Burke said a couple of weeks ago, you don't go through life without taking a hit. And certainly when you're working with people largely in their 80s and 90s, they've taken their fair share of hits, right? I mean, many have lost children, let alone spouses. So the significant losses of jobs and divorces and moving and again, war, they've lived through a lot. One patient in particular said to me, what is God, in the very beginning, what is God trying to teach us? What do we need to learn from this? And she said, it's up to the people to determine what happens now. And I thought that was so profound, because it really was up to us, the trajectory of what was to come. But in terms of my ethical will, certainly what Leslie said about family, I mean, it sort of goes without saying that, I wear that on my sleeves, if not my forehead, of how important family is to me. But in terms of Lakey, I think you said about doing for others. Of course, I believe doing for others, that's integral of who I am as a person. Yet I also believe in order to be there for others, you need to start with yourself, and you have to fill your own cup. How do you do that? Basic self-care. You always go back to those basics of nutrition, hydration, exercise, spirituality, religion, financial security, social stimulation, cognitive stimulation. Those are the core. You have to take care of yourself, because when you take care of yourself, then there's something for you to be able to take care of others. And then it's reciprocal, right? Taking care of others inadvertently helps you take care of yourself. So that would be, one of my parts of my ethical will, in terms of making sure you're there for yourself as well as for others, and then figure out sort of what sparks joy in your life. Where do you find laughter and humor, even in the hard times? Because I think that's what adds to some levity to be able to manage and get through. And finally, I think Ezra touched upon this, but also when you're looking at a situation, we have to determine what's in your control and what's not in your control. And there were many facets to this year that were just not in our control. So it was more of a matter of how do we make meaning, and how do we sort of capitalize on what we could do within the restrictions. And so if you can harness what's in your control, it feels better. The virus was there. That wasn't going anywhere. Washing hands, wearing a mask, physical distancing, that were methods of how we could control staying connected and taking care of yourself, and what your attitude was about it. I work with a lot of different people. Everybody had a different perspective on it. So the attitude, I think, is how you face challenges, can really impact how you come through it. So that would be sort of what I would like to leave us all with, I guess, with you.
Thank you. I'm sitting here and just trying to process all the so much tremendous wisdom and insights and thoughts and experiences that you've shared. I was talking to a student, and I think it was either Lori or Leslie said, the first two events of the series, we had, a Holocaust survivor. We had the second one was someone who had battled alcohol and opioid addiction, and he said, by any logical reasoning, he shouldn't even be alive at this point. And so they were, really incredible messages. And I could understand the pressure that you were under to, kind of meet that. And I think that in a sense, having, three parents who, it could be anyone's parents, it could be anyone's sibling, they could be anyone's, relative or acquaintance or friend, and each of you coming and sharing such, powerful, insightful thoughts on resilience, the experiences, that you went through, that we all went through, but everyone does it in their own way, and the challenges that each of you face and how you adapted to that. And, out of all of this, thinking about, what messages would you want to pass on to children, the values that you want them to live by and share, that you obviously, you're walking the walk of that, is just so incredible and powerful. And, I'm going to have to take some time to really process all of this. And I hope that we can say the same, for everyone who's participated, because I'm just so grateful to each of you for, taking the time and really the courage to come on and share, personal struggles and things that you've encountered, experiences, and like an ethical will that's really personal to share. So I really, really appreciate it. It is 9:07. And we did say that the Zoom span for students was about an hour these days. But if the panelists are okay, if you would be willing to stay on for a few minutes and answer any questions that anyone has, if that's okay, if anyone has any questions. Feel free to, you can unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can put it in the chat, whatever floats your boat. Okay, well, it looks like everybody's process. Oh, I'm muted. It looks like everyone's just taking the time to really process the thoughts. You're welcome to send me anything. This has been recorded, and I'll edit it and take out, the beginning. And so happy to share it with anyone who wants the link after. But really a tremendous thank you to Lori and to Ezra and to Leslie, and especially I think a big thank you goes to the children who so bravely had their parents come on and speak in front of their friends and their peers. So thank you to Hallie and Raina and Lauren and Emma And to everyone who helped to plan this, Gwyn and Harry and Jeremy, and the students on the Chabad board, and to my kids for behaving. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Your feedback is always welcome, and I'm going to say goodnight and wish that everyone stay healthy and safe, and God willing, we can be able to do something like this next year in person. So yeah, l'chaim to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eggie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless you.